There we go, the recording has started. So welcome to the Year 1 Phonics and Reading workshop for 2023. I like to split out the workshops for each year group because I think there's different messages that we want for each year group. And it's really nice now that your children have had a whole year of our phonics programme. So I really had to edit my slides from last year when we were just starting the programme to now thinking ahead where the children have had a year already of our programme. So hopefully this is going to be a little bit of a reminder, a bit of information about what's different in year 1, and an opportunity for you to ask questions if you'd like to at the end. So hopefully you can all see my screen. So I always give this message because I just think it's an important reminder to think reading is a key skill that your child is going to learn in school, particularly in an infant school. We have to make sure that foundation knowledge is there for future success. So we're preparing them for junior school, for secondary school, and for later life. And to be able to access anything, you need to be able to read. So that's why it's such a high priority at Westcott. It's why it's so important. And as well as teaching the children the skills of reading, we want to develop a love of reading in them so that they want to read and read a wide range. So reading requires 2 skills. You've got the phonics, which I'll come on to, and word recognition, and some of that will be sight vocabulary with tricky words. But then the other side of that, and it comes, we've already been developing it in foundation stage, but it ramps up a bit once they get to year 1 and particularly into year 2, is the understanding, it's the comprehension. So really understanding why the author has used particular vocabulary, what is the meaning behind different things, could they think of other ideas or different words, and all those sorts of things. So the understanding becomes as important as the decoding. But as you'll know, when your children start school, we get going with the phonics because that is one of the tools in their toolbox that's going to help them to be able to read the words. Once they can read the words, then we can develop those other skills of understanding, but also expression when they're reading, which we do in our reading practice sessions. So you'll already know some of this because your children, this will have been the same for them in foundation stage as it is in year 1. But phonics is taught daily in all year groups. Once the children get to year 2, and this, I'll mention this, I'll have another workshop next year if you want to attend, and I'll come back to this, but in year 2 the children will hopefully have completed the Little Wandle programme and will be starting to focus more on their spellings. So we do touch on that as part of our phonics sessions, but it becomes much more of a focus and linking their phonic awareness to their spelling and writing. The children are taught in whole class groups. If we feel there are children falling behind, finding it a bit tricky because not everybody is on the same pathway, then they may work in a smaller group with a trained adult as well. But what we like to do is teach them as a whole class, and then if any extra individuals need a bit what we call keep up in the afternoon, we'd take them out. And it may be that one day they're just finding it really difficult because of that particular sound and they need that extra 10 minutes keep up in the afternoon, but the next day they're absolutely fine. So it's very fluid, it's very individualized and very flexible. The reading that we do is linked to our daily phonics sessions, and the books that they read within those reading groups are linked to where they are in their phonics and linked to their assessments that we do every 6 weeks. So as you know, we're a Little Wandle letters and sounds school, and you'll all be familiar with that programme. You will have hopefully come to see one of our sessions last year, or you might be coming to see another one next week. And we really love the programme. It's a validated scheme by the DFE, and I think we've really noticed a difference in how the children are picking up their reading and their phonics quickly because of this programme. So we're really happy with it. So there is a specific teaching order. You'll recognise some of these sounds from next year, but it it progresses as the children move into year one, but there's a set pattern that we follow in the scheme, and you can see that progression on our website or on the Little Wandle website. Just to recap on some of the definitions, I'm sure your children have been using these words already, or ones that you can test them with. So when we're speaking about phonics, we talk about the phoneme, and the phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in a word. So if it's a CVC word like cat, there's 3 phonemes. There's k, at, and it's what you can hear. The grapheme is what you can see, so it's the letters representing that sound. Then we have digraphs, and they're 2 letters that make one sound, and there's some examples on my slide. And trigraphs, which are 3 letters, 1 sound. We also have split vowel digraphs, and these are vowels that are split by a consonant. For example, the word there is make. There's lots of other examples. These are quite important. I'll come on to it later when we talk about the phonics screening check in year 1, which is an important check for your children later in the year. And they often put lots of split digraphs in, but the children always say to me, oh, it's a split digraph. So they're very good at recognising them. And then we have some adjacent consonants. Now these are, we teach them as letters together, but they are individual sounds. But there's lots of examples of words there. But the important thing to note there is they are separate sounds. But it just helps the children when they're blending the word to learn them as 2 sounds together or 3 sounds together. Then we have tricky words. So again, from when they start the programme in foundation stage and continuing throughout year 1, we continue to build up their bank of tricky words. Not all words can be phonetically sounded out. Sometimes you just need to know the word. But I always say to the children, there's clues in the word. For example, said has got a s at the start, a d at the end. They're clues. It's just some of the other parts are a bit more tricky. So those clues help us get going and give us prompts, but we do need to learn the whole word. And we do lots of practice of tricky words. It's good to build up the children's sight vocabulary, because that then will eventually help them with their fluency when they're reading the reading books or other books that they're reading. So gradually over foundation stage and year 1, your child learns the entire alphabetic code, and the focus in year 1 goes away from the basic code, and we grow in the code. So we go back and look at those vowel digraphs, and we look at the alternative pronunciations of them. So for example, the letter or the sound A, the children learn it AI, that makes A, but there's also AY, there's A on its own. There's the split digraph. So they start to learn all the alternatives. So that's why it's called growing the code. And by the end of year 1, they will know lots of those alternatives. There's always in our language exceptions to the rule, but we teach them the most common ones to help them with their reading. So like I said, there's a clear programme progression that we follow, and that is available on our website, quite useful to look at, and on the Little Wandle's website. So the Little Wandle web page, there's a great tab for parents, and on there's lots of useful information if you want to have a look. I will link things on newsletters, but you can see there's videos, there's teaching points. So if you want to know more, I mean, obviously speak to us. We'd love you to ask us, but if you want to have a look as well, then that's a good place to go to. So I won't share these videos because these are videos that you've probably seen before. I know I linked them on a newsletter and I shared them last year in the workshop, but they're on the parents page that I just mentioned. There's some videos of the children enunciating the sounds, because sometimes it's difficult to know, if you haven't learned this way when you were at school, to know how to pronounce the sounds with your children. We have to do lots of training, and workshops before we teach it. So there's just some helpful videos in there if you're not sure. And there's also a great one about how to say the five sounds, including alternatives. So that would be a good video to watch as well. The important thing with enunciation, now your child writing more independently, is to not add in those sounds. So sometimes you might be tempted, if you're segmenting the word, for example, mum, you might go m. But then as your child writes it, they're going to add, after the m, they're going to add the plus some other letters which aren't there. Another one is t. So it's the short sounds sometimes that we add the sound into. So try not to do that. It's a short, sharp, snappy sound. The longer sounds are easier. So if you're doing s, that's easier. It's those short ones that we just need to be really careful with. With homework, so the big focus at Westcott for homework is our reading, but we sometimes send out other things for people that want to do it. So you can see the sounds that we've been learning, things that you can, they're quick things to revisit home. What I would say is the focus is on the reading. If you haven't got time for these things, or it's, you know, life's busy, children doing clubs, you've got family events going on, or they've not been well, please don't worry about it. You can always pick them up later on when you've got more time, but it's just so you're aware of what we've been doing. You can have a quick check to see how they're getting on, and it should help them with their reading as well. But that's just to, again, you'll be familiar with these anyway from last year. So I mentioned earlier about the phonics screening check. So in year 1 in June, the children do a phonics screening check. It's a booklet of 40 words, and I myself and last year Mrs. Bate administered the check. I actually did all the year 1s, and I'd plan to do that again this year. We do a practice with them earlier in the year. They're used to doing lots of the words throughout their phonics sessions anyway, and we have to record how they get on to see whether they meet the expected standard or not, and then we have to, it's reportable. We have to submit that to the local authority, and then they use that evidence to see how we're getting on as a school. The pass mark, ever since it started back in, well, it's been running quite a few years now, has always been 32, but they never release the pass mark until after the test has been administered in schools. So you're never quite sure if this is the year that they're going to change it, but it's usually about 32. The first 20 words of the check are quite simple words, CVC words. There are words with adjacent consonants in, some of the more simple vowel digraphs, and then it gets slightly harder. But they're all words the children have done, so there's nothing that they shouldn't have come across and that we haven't practiced with them. And then the last page is always compound words, where there's 2 words that make one. So they're slightly longer words, but it's about chunking up that word for the children. They usually do fine with that page. The other thing to note with the check is it's 20 real words and 20 made up words, nonsense words or alien words, whatever you want to call them. The real words aren't in context. They're not, if your child was reading them in a story or in their literacy work, that, you know, it'd probably be easier for them because their understanding helps them to decode that word. But this is just words on a page, and all it is checking is the phonetical level. For children who pass or meet the expected standards, so they get 32 or more, you'll get a letter saying they meet the expected standard. You know, fantastic. We still have their assessments, and we still do a revisiting in year 2 just to check that they haven't lost any of that learning over the summer, and then we move forward, like I say, moving on with spelling. If your child doesn't quite hit the expected standard, then we continue to work with them on the areas that they're finding tricky and more difficult. The children love, they don't really notice they call it a check, but it's like a test. They don't really notice. They love working with adults. We do it in a fun way. We can break it up and do it in 2 sections if a child's struggling. I make sure I do the day so that I try and do most of it in the morning when they're a bit fresher and not so tired. And they all get a sticker, so they're motivated. So yeah, it's nothing to worry about. It's just to make you aware that that's what we'll be doing. And then the end of school report is where you get the results from that. So reading, just a bit of a recap about how we teach reading. You'll all be experts at this by now, but we have our reading practice sessions that are taught in school, and the books that are selected for the children are based on their phonics assessments and where they are in their phonics. There shouldn't really be any sounds of words that they haven't come across within their phonics lessons. We do 3 reads over the week, and then you get that book home to have your celebratory read, and they should be able to read it to you without, well, very little support. Our 3 reads focus on decoding, prosody, comprehension. The decoding part we do at the start of every session, and any new vocabulary, but then with the prosody we pick a page, let's practice our expression. They love doing that. And then the comprehension is working on those understanding skills. So when they come home, it is just really important. It's just that's their book to celebrate with you. So this just gives a little bit of more information about that. There's a nice range of fiction and non-fiction books, and we're always trying to increase our number of books. And actually the Little Wandles scheme are always releasing new books. They came out with some stretch and challenge ones last year, and we're always trying to keep up and have a real range of books for the children and make sure they're high quality. There's some examples there. And they continue until the children have finished the scheme, and then they move on to our colour banded books. And again, we've got a real range of fiction, non-fiction books. So in addition to the reading practice book, because your child's read that 3 times in school and then they're going to read it once with you, you want to do more reading because we want to develop their vocabulary and their pleasure of reading and to develop their interests. So we also provide them with sharing books. And our sharing books are our home readers. And the children get to choose their home reader. So they have a bit of choice because the reading practice book is selected for them. But there may be words or sounds in those books that don't quite match their phonic ability. That's not their phonic book. Their phonic book is the reading practice book. This is just a book to develop their love of reading, to develop their vocabulary, and to just give them more variation in their reading. In addition to the sharing books, they go to the library every week and select a book from the library. So again, that's their choice. I'm sure they come home with some interesting topics. I know my son brought home a very heavy hardback book for his library book last week. I'm not sure how he's going to carry it back, but I always think it's interesting what they bring home for the library. But also we've got a real range of lovely books, both fiction and non-fiction, and we try to make sure our non-fiction selection matches things that they're interested in, the topics we're covering, and anything else we think the children would enjoy. So how often should we read with our children? Ideally, in an ideal world, I'd say every day, but I understand that people are busy. I don't manage it every night with my child. I don't mind admitting that, particularly my youngest, who finds reading really challenging. So we say as often as possible, but a minimum of 3 times a week. The more reading they'll do, the more confident they'll become. But what we don't want to do is make that not an enjoyable experience where if they really don't want to do it because they're tired or they've been at a club and they've got back late, but you're like, oh, we've got to do reading. We don't want it to be that experience. We want it to be something that you really enjoy doing together and that they continue to enjoy, because what we want to do is for them to love reading, so they want to continue reading all throughout their life. And sometimes they might not want to read their reading book, but they might want to read one of their books they've got, or You might have joke books. We've got Where's Wally books. My son often gets out. I think he knows because there's no words, but I think, well, it's a book, it's engaging him. So just keeping that pleasure and that going. And if you can visit the library, we'll do our library visits again this year, but if you can visit the library, we're so lucky in Woking that we've got such a fantastic space. Then please, you know, that's a great place to go as well. You've got your home reading diary. So it's a communication between home and school. We often just write in there the book the children have brought home, so you've got a record of it. But it's more for us to see how they're getting on with you and feedback from yourself. You'll all be familiar with these. And just a few other things about supporting your child. It just reiterates what I've said about the reading practice book and the sharing book, and about just making reading fun and enjoyable. Even important to see you reading, so they know that, you know, it's not just a skill you learn at school, it's a lifelong skill, and it can actually be really great for calming, for when you just want to escape from the world, get yourself into a good book. So it's like I say, it's a lifelong skill. I've talked at my computer now for a very long time, and I find it very difficult being able to see people's faces. So this is your opportunity if you'd like to ask any questions. I appreciate some might not want to and you'd rather email them in. That's absolutely fine. But if you have got anything now, you're more than welcome to ask. I'm taking from the silence that nobody's got any questions, which is fantastic. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. I'll make sure that, thank you. I'll make sure this presentation is downloaded and popped on the website, and I'll let everybody know when that link's available. I'll also pop the PDF separately, because you won't want to watch the video back because you've been here, but you might want to have a look at the slides to remind yourself, or look at the links that I've put on there. And I'll make sure that's on the website as well. On our curriculum page, we've got a dedicated page for phonics and reading. So it's really nice to see you. I'm going to stop recording now. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. You've probably got to rush out the door to get the children now.
Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.